Stay tuned.
Hi everybody, I'm May Chen, and this is the 1202nd edition of Motorsports Unlimited. Most of the program you're going to see today was taped nearly 20 years ago at ABC Auto Parts. Of course, we promised last week we were going to air one of the many shows we shot at ABC this week because the folks at ABC are on our mind. We picked this one for a very important reason, which we'll explain as we go along. Right now, let's learn about engine configurations.
Have you ever wondered why there are so many different engine configurations? You know, V8s, V6s, 4s, inlines, opposed, and all the rest? Well, today, we're going to help you understand volumetric efficiency. Now, don't change the channel. We're going to make it fun. At least, we're going to try. There are really some pretty interesting reasons for the various engine designs, and if you know a little about it, you can decide for yourself what's best for you. Of course, we needed a variety of engine examples to use as props. We turned to our friends at ABC Auto Parts and asked them to gather up an interesting group. As always, they came through for us. Let's join our lovely ladies of motorsport as they find their way through the ABC facility in search of volumetric efficiency.
Kim Carlson, I understand you are the one that is most excited about the subject we have today.
Oh, yeah.
And what is our subject? Come on over here. She's going to say it wrong. What is our subject now?
Volumetric efficiency.
And what do you suppose that means?
I don't know.
Okay. Kimmy, explain it to her. Volumetric efficiency, and tell the audience that I just explained this to you.
He just explained it to me, but I forgot.
Did you really? Seriously?
We were talking about so many things, about if I was to put a different engine in my car, what would be the advantages of it? Does that have something to do with it?
Yeah, that's kind of got something to it. I guess that does. Okay, what we are going to talk about today is one of the things that is, I don't want to say troubled me, but it does in a sense. For years and years and years, I've heard people identify engines by whether it's a 6 or an 8. In other words, a person's going to go and buy a new car, and did you get a 6 or an 8? And the implication has always been, if you got a 6, you got an economy engine, low power. If you got an 8, you got a powerful engine. Is that about your feeling of what?
Yeah.
Okay, that would be your sense of that.
Right.
Okay, the problem is that's inaccurate. Cylinders and number of cylinders count, but they don't count exactly like people think they count. They count, but not in quite the same way. For example, Kimmy, I asked you coming in here, if your car had a V8 in it, what did you think you'd get, and what did you tell me?
More power.
And what did I tell you?
Well, you didn't say I was wrong. It's partially right, but it's not the whole.
Well, it could be either right or wrong.
Right.
By virtue of the fact that an engine is an 8 or a V8 does not necessarily mean that it has more power than what do you have?
I have a 4.
Okay, you have a 4. So by virtue of the fact that the engine is a 4 or a 6 or an 8 doesn't necessarily determine whether it has more power or not. Now, we have come to think that way in this country because for years it has been convenient for the auto companies to use basically inline 6-cylinder engines for their economy models, and then if a person wanted more power, to put in a V8. Well, the reason for that really is a matter of convenience and packaging, although Madison Avenue, meaning the sales department, gets a hold of it and they want to come up with big promotion campaigns, and they tend to make, and I understand it, by the way, I would do the same thing, but it's sort of inaccurate. They want to make it like there's some magic in the V, like having a V8 or a V6 has some sort of magic, and it doesn't at all. So today what we want to explain is volumetric efficiency, and I can't avoid at the same time talking about the configuration of the engine, the configuration of cylinders. I wish there were a way to separate this and do a show just talking about volumetric efficiency without talking about cylinder configuration, but these distinctions tend to get blurred. I'm also going to mention a little bit during the course of the program about engine balance. This is not going to be a show about engine balance. One of these days we are going to do something like that because it's actually pretty interesting, this whole notion of balance. I'm going to talk about it a little bit, I'm going to touch on it, but we're not going to try to make a show out of that, okay? So now follow me over here now, and I'm going to need lots of help today. And by the way, I should identify once again that our friends at ABC Auto Parts have been absolutely wonderful. Chuck, if you can broaden your camera shot and just take a look at what we've all got going here, they have laid out just a ton of engines that show many cylinder configurations, which are going to help in our discussion as to what we're going to try to explain today. And we want to thank these folks. Anyhow, first thing we're going to do is start out with the simplest, and this is my own representation. Wait a minute. What was that?
Yes, Bill.
Okay. My own representation. Now, what I want you to think about is that this cardboard roll down here represents the crankshaft, and these styrofoam cups represent the cylinder. All right? Kim Carlson, how many cylinder engine is this?
1.
Okay, this is a one-cylinder engine. Now, if the engine were like that would be like in a typical motorcycle fashion, right? If the cylinder were up, would you agree?
Yeah.
Okay, do you know there are also some motorcycles, single-cylinder motorcycles, that would have the cylinder mounted slightly forward like that?
No.
Okay, and they also have some where the cylinder goes straight forward. Did you know that?
No.
Okay, but they're all single-cylinder engines, and this is a one-cylinder configuration. Okay, that's what we start with. Now, moving up from there, obviously we don't have any other kinds of configurations with a one-cylinder engine because we're pretty limited. We can't necessarily have a V1 because it's one cylinder, right? Although, let me make one little caveat there. There is an engine called a Twingle. No, this is true. There's an engine. In fact, Puch of Austria made it. And while it was 2 cylinders, it only had one connecting rod with a Y fork in it. And both pistons rose and fall together. It was a 2-stroke, and it was an interesting kind of scavenging arrangement.
They seriously called it a Twingle?
They called it a Twingle. It wasn't really a twin, but it wasn't a single either. They called it a Twingle. But we won't worry about that one right now. It was kind of cool. So the next thing we go to then is, Kim Donahue, what's this?
It's a 2-cylinder.
This is a 2-cylinder engine, and again, this cardboard roll represents the crankshaft. What would you call this kind of 2-cylinder engine?
Oh, gee.
What's your 4 called?
It's an inline?
Inline.
That's correct. You could call this an inline, or you could call it a parallel twin. Now, an example of something like this that they would use this thing for is Triumph motorcycles, BSA motorcycles, many Japanese motorcycles. These are parallel twin engines. This is a representation of what a parallel twin looks like. Now, there's other ways, of course, to do a twin cylinder. Chris Schutz, what's this?
Opposed.
This is an opposed engine, and one thing I want to mention here real quickly on this thing, I took some pains. I didn't get crazy on the accuracy, but if we look at this from the top, we can see that the cylinders are not directly across from each other. Do you have any idea why that might be, Kim Carlson?
No.
Do you see what I'm talking about, though? In other words, okay, yeah.
They're not lined up.
They're not lined up. Well, there's a reason for that, and the reason is, and again, I don't want to get into balance because this balance is a tricky thing, but I'm going to be mentioning balance throughout the day, and I want to just give a little explanation of how tricky it can be. One of the engines that's terrible for balance, and Chris, if you could hold this, one of the engines that's terrible for balance is a single-cylinder engine. And if you think about it, what you have in a single-cylinder engine is that you've got a piston going up and down in this cylinder, and going up and down rather rapidly. Now, the problem with that is every time the piston gets to the top of its stroke, remember it's got the connecting rod attached to it, every time it gets to the top of its stroke, now it has to change direction and go back down to the bottom of its stroke. Every time it gets to the bottom of the stroke, it has to change. So you can see that's a tremendous amount of weight going up and down, up and down. Everybody understand that? All right, so you have to balance it. If you didn't in some way try to balance that, the thing would literally shake itself to pieces with the weight of the piston up, down, up, down. So on the crankshaft itself, they have a counterweight on the opposite side. So as the piston goes up, the counterweight is going to the bottom, so that when the piston weight gets to the top of its stroke, a percentage of its weight is represented by the crankshaft counterweight that's at the bottom of the stroke, balancing that out. Now that's called primary balance. So if you have a single-cylinder engine with good primary balance, that force is canceled out. The problem that it creates is, what about when that weight, which is going around continuously, what about when that counterweight is going this way? or this way. There's nothing to balance that. Now that has terrible secondary imbalance. So it's got good primary balance and terrible secondary balance. Do you follow that, how that would be a problem to balance a single?
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, if
What
you
do
don't
they-
understand, please say so.
What do they do to alleviate the problem?
They let it shake.
Oh,
Right, it's a problem with single-cylinder engines. That's why single-cylinder motorcycles, one cylinder, lots of guys are in love with the big 500cc they shake like crazy.
okay.
Okay? Everybody understand that. Now, when you take a twin like this is an opposed twin. It is an ideal balance arrangement because you can have this piston going out, this piston going out, and they cancel each other out. And you can do the same thing with the rotating weights on the crankshaft, so you can cancel out the secondary imbalance. But there's a third...
Would you, if this is equal and it's balanced, why would you have to have the weight on the crankshaft?
Well, you still have to have the crankshaft counterweights because you're dealing with connecting rod weight and all that. So you have to cancel that weight out when it swings around this way for a secondary imbalance.
Oh, okay.
So you've got the primary balance and the secondary balance. But there's a third balance problem that comes in here. And the best way I can describe it, I wish I had a bicycle here, but you can do this experiment yourself. Take a bicycle, turn it upside down, take the chain off. The crank pedals on the bicycle represent a crankshaft. That is, in effect, a crankshaft. That's what a crankshaft is, all right? Now, if you turn those around, you can see it has perfect primary balance because there's a pedal with the same weight at the other side, right? So no matter where you are, if we're turning, hold this like this, Christine. So on the bicycle pedals, if I turn it, if the pedal is at the bottom, there's one at the top.
Right.
If the pedal is over here,
And
there's
that's-
one over here then, right? So it has,
Right.
so it has
That's
perfect.
primary
That's
balance.
primary and secondary balance, okay?
Primary
so it,
and secondary.
so it has both. But yet, if you took that crank thing and spun it real hard, you can actually feel the bike shake. And the reason it shakes is that if you look at it now from this view, like this, the bicycle crank arrangement, you will see that the one weight is off to the left side and the one weight is off to the left side. And that's what's called a rocking couple. So it's not just primary balance and secondary balance, it's also this rocking couple problem. And this is what happens in motorcycle engines too. For example, BMW uses this arrangement and it's an exceptionally smooth engine, with the exception that the rods have to be next to each other on the crank pin. They have to clear each other. So the one cylinder is slightly further forward than the other cylinder. Now there's another way to do that. It's what's called a knife and fork rod arrangement. Harley-Davidson uses a knife and fork rod arrangement where you could have these cylinders directly across from each other, and the one rod has like a fork, and the other rod has the knife that goes in between it, so they're both on the same plane. That solves that problem, but again, then you kind of end up with a weaker connecting rod arrangement. So everything is compromises here. But we're wasting more time than I want to on this, but the balance thing is interesting. We're going to do a whole show on balance and talk about that, but I'm going to kind of ask you to take my word for it through the show when I say a specific configuration has an excellent balance and some are terrible. Single-cylinder engine is terrible. This vertical twin is terrible. Take it from a guy that rode lots of Triumphs and BSAs. These things shook like crazy. And yes, folks, I know that there are people who are going to say that they now have where they add balancer shafts to add weight to counter some of this secondary imbalance, and I understand all that. I'm talking about an engine having an inherently balanced design where it doesn't have to resort to monkey motion to make it better. Single cylinder is terrible. Vertical twin is a terrible setup. The opposed twin is an excellent setup. The opposed engines are very, very good from a balance standpoint. Here's another way to do a twin. Christine, what do we got?
V-twin.
That's correct, V-twin. What would be an example of a V-twin, Kim?
Would be
You just walked past one.
what, the motorcycle?
Right.
Okay.
Harley-Davidson. Now, and again,
Are
this...
they the only type that use this?
No, as a matter of fact, remember when we did the Ducati show? Kim, you were with us with the Ducati show, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, now the Ducati uses a 90-degree V-twin, which is kind of what this is. This is sort of a widely spread V, and the Harley-Davidson uses a 45-degree V-twin design, which means these are a little bit narrow angle, but they're still V-twin designs, okay? And again, all of these things are compromises. The reason they use a V-twin design is particularly for a motorcycle, it is important that the engine be narrow. You want to be able to get between trees and things like that. Follow me? Okay, so that's important also. So that's what a V-twin design is for. Now we go, and I'm going to step over to the other side here, and Chris, maybe you can grab that triple and hand it down to me. Let me just step over here. All right, 3-cylinder. Again, I don't want to get too heavily into this balance stuff. Inline 3-cylinder is terrible engine to balance. This is not a good configuration. It represents a way of making an economy engine in various sizes, and there's some other things we want to get involved. In fact, let me stop for a second right now.
This configuration in a car, is this
Oh,
still
absolutely,
viable?
absolutely. In the early days, DKW made a car with a 3-cylinder 2-stroke. Saab made a car with a 3-cylinder 2-stroke, and even today, the Geo Many of the Geo lines have 3 cylinders, and Suzuki cars have some 3-cylinder engines. So that is not an unusual configuration. And some of the things, and we're going to talk about this, and Chuck, if you can come over here just for a second, some of the things that we have to determine here, this volumetric efficiency, in my mind, because this is Motorsports Unlimited, no, I'll be right back down. In my mind, Motorsports Unlimited, we talk about racing and things like that, and we want to make things more powerful. So the number one consideration is volumetric efficiency when we're making these decisions. But when people manufacture engines, this is a big consideration. All right? Okay. Pardon me?
Probably the biggest consideration.
Right. It's a big consideration is cost, and it is the more cylinders you have, the more expensive it is to make the motor. So you can see that it would be compelling. Let me ask you this, Kim. Why doesn't the manufacturer, say a car, let's pick a Buick, why don't they make, say, a 400 cubic inch, 1-cylinder engine?
And not enough power? I don't know.
No, well, you could make it very, very powerful. You could make a 1-cylinder engine. Part of it is the lack of volumetric efficiency, so maybe you'd have to have a 600 cubic inch 1-cylinder engine to match the power of a 400 cubic inch V8 engine because it doesn't have the volumetric efficiency, and we'll get into that because that's a real important thing. But from a cost standpoint, it's a lot easier to make 1 piston, 1 cylinder, 1 set of valves, everything in one. The problem is that the engine is so inefficient that the power losses are so great, and the vibration would be absolutely horrendous, and the RPM would be very low because this huge piston going up and down would be really hard to change direction. So it's real. But then the other question has to be asked. If we recognize all those disadvantages with this big 1-cylinder engine I'm proposing, if we recognize, then why don't we do a V32?
I don't know.
Well, part of it is cost. Another part of it is size. Size. Pardon me?
Too heavy?
Good one. Good one. We're talking about weight. The more mechanical complexity, the more weight, the more size we're adding to the motor. And how about, well, I guess size would be bulk. That'd be the same as bulk. So these are some of the considerations as why manufacturers select certain things, okay? Right. Now, there's another way to do a 3-cylinder engine. Christine, right behind you here, and we've got some folks here today, and we'll pan the camera on later. They're going to find this part of the explanation of some interest. Anybody think of what this might be? This is also a 3-cylinder design. Kim, go ahead and tell
I know
them.
it's like a V. I don't know.
Yeah, it's almost like a V. I'll tell you what it was. DKW, Road Racing Motorcycles, DKW is a German company. After World War II, in just the real late 40s, early 50s, they wanted to enter the, I believe it was the 350cc World Championship, and they were the 250 World Champions or 250 World Championship contenders. So they needed a larger engine. They didn't want to make their vertical twin any larger because of the loss of volumetric efficiency. They didn't feel they'd be competitive. They also felt if they made it an inline 3, Chris, can you hold that inline 3 up again? They also felt that if they made this thing an inline 3 like this, obviously with smaller cylinders, but if they made it like this, it'd be too wide. The riders wouldn't be able to corner well with it. They'd gouge the engine into the ground. So they wanted to go to more cylinders, but they didn't want to do it that way. So what they did, and I think kind of a brilliant move, is they really added the cylinder to the crankshaft, having the center cylinder going straight forward, and then the vertical twin operating the way it normally did. It was actually quite a brilliant design and very, very effective. Lousy from a balance standpoint, but then a parallel twin is so bad to begin with, they said let it shake. You know, it was kind of the idea was to let it shake. But anyhow, it's an interesting configuration. And interestingly enough, a little side piece of this story, they only made like 7 or 8 of these things in the world. My guess would be that there are none left in Germany. And surprisingly enough, there's a fellow in Elk Grove Village that actually has an antique, one of these DKW motors. I couldn't believe it when I saw it a few years ago. I happened to run into it. So anyhow, but it was an interesting design. So Chris, if you'd set that back over there. And Kimmy, now right behind you, now we get into what you've got, right?
This
Okay.
is my car.
Okay, well, that's sort of your car. Your car would be more like, let me think, right behind us here.
Oh.
Oh.
This would be, Kim, can you hold the microphone for me? Just hold it for me like that. This would be more like Kim's car.
Let me dream.
This would be more like hers. But what kind of a configuration do we have here, Kim?
It's an inline 4.
Wait a minute, you need the mic.
It's an inline 4.
Okay, it's an inline 4. Now, how else can you do a 4? First of all, I want to tell you again, inline 4 is a lousy engine from a balance standpoint. Again, balance isn't the only. Yes.
Are all the inlines lousy?
No. Oh, no. It's just certain. And again, I don't want to do a balanced show, but it has to do with the forces that operate within the engine and which forces can cancel out which forces and all that. And actually, it's a sort of a complicated explanation, but it's quite understandable. But that's what I'm saying. You kind of take my word for it right now. inline four, unless they put balancing shafts in with these things, these engines are pretty rough. Your engine, I think you've got a Chrysler product, and I believe they've got counter-rotating balance shafts in there to kind of smooth the engines out. But they have to resort to monkey. Yeah, do they?
I guess, yeah.
Okay. They have to sort of resort to monkey motions. But you can do a four-cylinder in another way. And Kim Carlson, right behind you, let's do this one first. What have we got here? What do we call this one?
Opposing.
That's right. This is an opposed four-cylinder engine. And this has the potential to have perfect balance. Now, Christine, what famous engine, maybe more than any other engine ever manufactured, uses this configuration?
I don't know.
Volkswagen Beetle. Volkswagen Beetle engine. It's an opposed four. It was a perfect. And I'll tell you something. Let me give you another example, too, of people that use opposed fours, and I don't think get nearly enough credit for it. Subaru. The Subarus, they used all their little Econoboxes and everything, always used, other than the Justy, I think, is a triple. But all the rest of them have all been opposed fours, although they've got a six now. That's really interesting. But I have been wait a minute.
Like this?
Yeah, well, I haven't looked into Justy, so I don't want to say, but all of the other Subaru, I've never thought, because understand the difference. With the Volkswagen, this was easy because the engine was in the back. You didn't have to put it between a couple of wheels that have to turn and steer. You could, it was really quite easy on the Volkswagen to use it. In fact, most engines that are opposed engines are rear-engine cars because it's easy to do it back there. But give Subaru credit. They do this in a front-engine, front-wheel drive car, and as a matter of fact, their new SVX, yes. We've got to be getting. We're running out of tape already. Okay, we've got to make a change here. Let me pick up on this. We're talking about opposed fours when we come back. Girls, I want you guys to bunch up just a little bit and with your what?
With my car.
Tell the camera.
Don't go away, folks. We'll be right back.
Bill seems to be saying that more cylinders for any given size engine means greater volumetric efficiency, but also more cost, complexity, size, and weight, I think. Before we go any further, let's meet the girls on today's show.
Hi, I'm Kim Donahue.
I'm Kim Carlson.
And I'm Chris Schatz.
Bill seems to be saying that opposed engines have better balance and more cylinders mean greater volumetric efficiency. But if that's true, why aren't all engines opposed 20s or something like that? Let's watch.
All right, I've been told and scolded. We have got to hustle here. Where are we at, Kim?
V4.
We're at V4? Okay, here is another way to do a four-cylinder. It's obvious. I won't go into it except to tell you this is a terrible balance engine. This is a terrible problem with engine balance. That's another way to do it. Okay, we did inline four. We did opposed four. We said the opposed four was good. That was the Volkswagen design and all. It did very well. Okay, five-cylinder. If we take this one, Christine, hand me the one-cylinder inline very quickly now. Okay, we tack it on the end and tilt this thing down to show the audience. Now we've got an inline five-cylinder engine. And Kim Carlson, who was that? Inline five. Audi. They still make it today. Again, a peculiar choice at best. It gives you odd balance problems. It doesn't sound particularly good. I know kind of why they did it. I don't agree, but it's a but they make one anyhow. That's one way to do a five-cylinder engine. Here's another way to do a five-cylinder engine. Kim Carlson, what are we looking at here?
Fan.
No, this is an engine. Kim Donahue, go ahead and tell her.
It looks like a circle.
Well, this is what's. Go ahead.
It looks like for a plane or helicopter.
Exactly. This is called a radial engine, and this one is a five-cylinder radial engine. And again, the advantage here, of course, is a very, very narrow crankshaft, and also it puts all the cylinders out into the wind. And just as a quick little side note, airplane people argue all the time, just like every other kind of motorsport community. They argue all the time, and there are many people who say real airplanes have round engines. So a lot of people don't consider the ones that don't have radial engines real airplanes. Anyhow, that's just another way of doing a five-cylinder engine. Now we'll move on to six cylinders, and the six cylinder, Christine, get me the parallel twin back there and the inline four. Okay, and the reason, by the way, we don't have a representation of these is because I ran out of tube here to make it. So anyhow, this is what an inline six-cylinder engine would look, and this was the basic economy engine for years and years and years in America, was an inline six-cylinder engine. It wasn't the fact that it was a six-cylinder engine that was the reason it was an economy engine. It was the fact that it was a smaller engine. Usually these engines range from 200 to 230 cubic inches, and usually the V8s started at around 300 cubic inches. So people thought they got a six, and a six meant less horsepower. The fact of the matter was, they were smaller engines. They could have also been small V8s and gotten good gas mileage too. It wasn't the fact there were 6 that somehow magically made it gas mileage. That's not the point. The point has to, in fact, the opposite point could be made. If you made a V8 the same size as this 6, in all likelihood, the V8 would get better gas mileage because you've taken the same size, broken it down into smaller cylinders. You get greater, Kimmy, what?
Volumetric efficiency.
Greater volumetric efficiency, better use of the fuel and all that. But we've come to think of 6 and 8, and that's what I just wanted to dispel that a little bit. It's not true at all. Okay, that's one way to do a 6-cylinder. Go ahead and put those things off to the side. Kim Carlson, what have we got here now? Okay, and what is this?
V6.
Okay, this is a V6, very popular today. Everybody, frankly, I'm so sick of V6s. They're not only not particularly good, they're particularly lousy. It's a lousy way to do an engine. It's a terrible balance problem. They do all kinds of contortions on these things with offset crank pins. I won't get into all that to try to get them to balance. I don't like the way they sound. I don't like anything about them. They're cheap to make, and when the auto industry was pressured by the government to downsize these things, the cheapest way to do it was to take and chop off 2 cylinders and give everybody a thrill and say, you got a great V6 now. And
what cars have those?
Almost everything.
Almost everything? Okay.
Almost everything uses V6. I personally don't like them. Part of this is personal opinion. Let me also say this. Some very, very effective, when they had the turbocharged formulas in Formula 1, Honda used a turbocharged V6. Renault had a turbocharged V6. One of the big advantages, let me just not bum wrap, one of the big advantages of this is very short, stiff crankshaft. So if you have an engine making lots of power, you can get a good, tough crankshaft without having it be excessively heavy because it's short and stiff. But overall, this is not a good way to do an engine.
Not only that, if you're just doing an engine for racing, it doesn't make any difference how much it costs. You're only making the one, so
Well,
they're going to...
no, this is a low-cost approach, but that's not what I'm saying is that the vibrations problems bother me with these. I don't particularly care for this configuration. I think it's just for cost effectiveness. And what have we got here now, Kim Carlson? What have we got?
Opposed.
Okay, this is an opposed 6-cylinder engine. Chris, who uses this?
I don't know.
Kim?
I have no idea.
Oh, come on, Porsche?
Do they?
gee.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sure, Porsche, the great famous Turbo Carrera, that we've driven. In any event, yeah, Porsche uses this. This engine is perfect balance engine. The opposed 6 is just a superb way to do an engine. Again, problem to put it in the front of an automobile. Porsche, of course, does them in the rear of the car. Corvair, this is the way the Corvair engines were. They put them in the rear. It's easy to do it back there. But interestingly enough, as I explained before, Subaru, with their new SVX, has an opposed this is also called a flat engine. These are called opposed, they're called flat, and they're also called boxer engines. This configuration is quite good, but it's real bulky. And Kim Carlson, if you'd hold the mic for a second, do remember one of the things that has to happen, we don't have any cylinder heads on here yet, so if you're going to put cylinder heads here, now the engine gets even wider, and then to add the camshafts to that, it gets wider still. You can generally figure, like on an overhead cam engine, you can figure the head and the cams are going to double what the cylinders, so if you got the cylinders here, you have to add that much more out here. So it's real hard to put that in a front engine car. And that new SVX, in fact, I had to go to a dealer and look at it. I want to see how they did it. And it is really an engineering work of art. They did a brilliant job with it. Hard to do, but, and I don't think they get enough credit for it. I don't think anybody ever mentions it. Presumably they go through all this just to get the fine balance in an opposed 6-cylinder engine. This is a nice way to do an engine. The opposed 6 is very good. Okay, moving on down, what have we got here? Okay. Guys, what do you think?
Inline 8.
Inline 8. Now, who uses that? Oh, let's try this again. Kim Carlson, follow me on over here. Now, okay, let's try this again. Who uses an inline 8? Well, who's ooh?
A Packard?
Well, that's right. This one happens to be a Packard inline 8-cylinder engine. And the picture that we started this particular little segment on, that happens to be a car that uses, and in fact, if you step over there in front, I want you to take a look at that. And quite often, the engine actually dictated a little bit what the cars look like. Now, Chuck, I don't know if, say again?
The engine's so long.
Exactly. The engine compartment is so long to house this very long straight 8 engine, okay? Now, let's step back over here. Now, what's some of the disadvantages here? And again, we got to move quickly. I'm getting told again I'm going too long. What's the disadvantage?
It's too big.
Well, no.
Long.
Okay, one of the problems is, remember, a crankshaft. Now, this, by the way, inline 8, perfect balance. Inline 6, I should have mentioned that before. The inline 6, perfect balance. Inline 8, perfect balance.
This has to have an extremely long crankshaft.
Right, that's the problem. The crankshaft, even though the balance, everything, all the internal forces are balanced out in an engine like this or an inline six, the problem is the crankshafts get so long on an inline six or an inline eight, you end up getting crank flex, which can confuse you, and you might think you're getting an imbalance condition, and what you're getting is crank flex. It's a problem. Plus, the crankshaft gets very heavy. In order to make this crankshaft stiff, because it's so long, you've got to make it, put a lot of material in it. So another way to do an 8-cylinder engine then is, what have we got here?
The V8.
Okay, this is the V8 that everybody talks about because this has been America's favorite. It really has. It does a number of things. There's a romantic side to this too. The disadvantage of this is it's not a good engine from a balance standpoint. It's not terrible. It's not like a V6. A V6 is awesome, is awful, but a V8 is pretty good. It's not great, but it's pretty good. The advantage is look how short that crankshaft is for some. In fact, we've got another. I said this is a small block V8. We also have a big block V8 here that uses the big cups like that one. But you can see that the crankshaft can be much shorter, much stiffer. The whole package is smaller. It can be lighter. It can fit into a smaller area and make the same power that the straight 8 does. So that's kind of why it's gone to this.
How can the 6-cylinder, though, be so awful and the 8-cylinder V is better? I mean, it's still the same configuration.
Well, again, I don't want to go into, it's real complicated, the explanation. It has to do with balancing out all the forces that are acting inside, having something that balances it out. And it's not available in the 8. From here you would go then to, and we don't have a configuration of this, so we will take our V8 and our V4. If you can grab the V4, Christine. Right here. Okay, we put these two together. And what do we have? Kim Donahue?
12.
Wait a minute, did I grab the wrong? Yes, I grabbed the wrong side. Give me the V2, Christine. I did it wrong.
So we're gonna have 10?
No, there you. What are we going to have?
10?
Yeah, the V2, Chris. We're getting all confused, right?
Yes, we got all our
This one right here. Okay. Yeah, you should have seen me making these things. Okay, now we have a V10. Anybody real quick think of again, a V10 is not a great thing from a standpoint of balance. It's not, it's a little better than a V8, still not wonderful. Who uses a V10? Christine?
I have no idea.
Okay, the new Renault Formula One car is a V10 configuration, and who else?
But,
The new Viper, the new Chrysler
Oh,
Viper is a
yeah.
V10. Yeah, V10. And it's special. It's exotic. I'm not too much in love with it. If you're going to do this many, let's go to the next step, in my opinion. Let's go to the next step. And what do we have here? What?
V12.
Okay, we've got a V12. V12 has inherently perfect balance. It's an excellent engine. Who uses V12s, Kim? Ferrari. How about who else?
Lamborghini?
Jaguar, Lamborghini, okay, these guys use V12. This is an excellent design, excellent balance, but remember what's happening here. We're getting, let's assume a 400 cubic inch, let me just grab something here. Let's assume a 400 cubic inch inline 4-cylinder and a 400 cubic inch V12. What do we get from each? Kim?
I don't know.
Okay. You would get more power out of the V12 because you have greater volumetric efficiency. The volumetric efficiency refers to the fact that it is easier and quicker to fill and empty a smaller cylinder than it is a bigger cylinder. It's very, now remember, let's just say at 5,000 RPM, that's a relatively low RPM. Each cylinder has to fill and empty about 40 times a second at 5,000. Now at 10,000 RPM, that's 80 times a second. The cylinders have to fill and empty. Well, it's much easier to do it with smaller cylinders than with big cylinders, so you get more complete burning, more complete combustion, everything works better. So what you get with this is greater volumetric efficiency, same size engine, so you'd get better horsepower or better fuel mileage or whatever you were trying to accomplish, you'd get a more efficient engine. But what do you give up? Help me.
Length.
Well, again, the V12 is getting bulky now, a lot of mechanical complexities, heavy, lots of extra parts. Really, believe me, it's a ton more expensive to service a V12 than it is an inline 4. So these are all the considerations, things that you have to consider when you're designing. This is what engineers do. These are the problems we wrestle with, and unfortunately, I wish I could tell our audience that this is a great simple answer. The fact is, there's not. We wrestle with these problems all the time. I just thought it would be interesting to run through these things and what we talk about. I personally love the V12s. I'm going to tell you something. When you drive one, there's nothing quite as silky as a V12. It has perfect balance, but in addition to balance, remember you're taking all of those little explosions that what happens when an engine runs, you're breaking it up into little tiny explosions, just lots more of them, and the engines are silky smooth. That's a real nice configuration. Just as good a configuration as that, although more difficult to put into a car, is this one. And what do we have here?
Opposed 12.
That's correct. This is an opposed 12. And Kim, who uses this?
I don't know.
Ferrari Boxer, the Boxer 12 Ferraris. That's what these things are. This is a FET, and they use this for these Formula One engines for years. And again, we get back to the practical side of this thing. Real quick, their Formula One cars for years, they used opposed 12-cylinder engines. You have perfect balance, you have great volumetric efficiency and all that. But what happens is you end up with the cylinder heads. Now remember what happens here. Christine, hold this for a second. Yeah, if you guys can hold it just like that. We're going to run out of hands here. Okay, if we have to add double overhead camshafts and cylinder heads to this, look how wide this thing, in fact, tilt it down just a little bit. This ends up way out here like this. We've got more like that. And what we end up with is the cylinders right in the place where the tunnels have to go for the ground effects. So Ferrari abandoned the opposed 12-cylinder engines a long time ago and went to the V12 design just because you want to get the cylinder heads out of the airstream of the tunnel so they can get their ground effects. So everything is compromised. There's very few perfect answers. Everything is compromised. Now let's go even further than that. And how about this one? Now we're going to get really goofy, right? Take this. Got it, Chris? Okay, let's get rid of this one. Kim Carlson, what do we have there?
16.
That's right. This is a V16.
this?
Cadillac had a V16. Marmon had a V16. And right now, and I can't pronounce the name. If I had it in front of me, I couldn't say it. There's a company in Italy producing like a Countach or a Ferrari-type sports car with a V16. Wow. Again, perfect balance, lots of mechanical complexity, lots of bulk, lots of size, but great volumetric efficiency, great balance, silky smoothness. Really, I like this stuff.
The engine compartment would have to be huge.
Well, that's true. Now let me show you one more configuration, and then we're going to be done with this. One more configuration in this thing, which I think is one of the most fascinating ways of doing it. This happens to be, Kim Carlson, tell us.
I don't know.
Kim Donahue?
I don't know what you'd call this.
Chris?
It's an H16.
That's correct. And who used it, Kim?
I don't know.
Okay, this was an absolutely brilliant, and the reason it's called an H, well, let's hold this to the camera this way, look at it this way, and as you can see, if we had a leg here and a leg here and a piece across here, we've got an H. It makes it an H16.
You have to look at it like this. That looks like an H.
Yeah, no, you look at it like a laid down H. It works like this, and the company that used this was BRM in the late 50s, and that was British Racing Management.
I mentioned
BRM
earlier we
Formula
picked
1 team.
this show for
This
a
was their
reason,
H16
and the
design,
reason
essentially it
is
had
there
two
is a
crankshafts.
new
It was two
engine
opposed
configuration that
eight-cylinder
didn't
engines, one on
exist
top
when
of the
this
other
show
with
was
the crankshafts
taped,
geared together.
and we're
It gives a
pestering
nice,
ABC
short,
to
stiff
come up with
crankshaft,
one of
gave
them
a
so
very
we can
compact design
explain.
and great volumetric efficiency because, again, they worked with the same displacement limit that everybody else did. So who can get the most power? And I don't remember what it was at the time. Let's say it was 3 liters. Who can get the most power out of 3 liters? Well, this will do it. But if you build it like this, look how bulky it is and how heavy it is. You can do it a lot. It's not easier to do it this way. And by the way, those that heard these engines run, they said you haven't heard anything until you've heard an H16 at about 12,000 RPM. This is an awesome sound. Yes, Christine.
Now, we've seen all the different types of configurations. If you were going to build a passenger car, design it, what configuration would you choose for an engine car?
Front engine car?
Yeah.
Okay, that's right. Well, I like the V12. If I'm going to do a front engine car, I'm going to do a V12, and if I'm going to do a rear engine car, I probably want to do a Boxer 12. I want to do an opposed 12. I personally like it. And again, when you get into let me give you an example. Cadillac has a brilliant new engine, an engine called a North Star engine. It's one of the first really, really new engines in America in a long time. It's a double overhead cam, 4-valve per cylinder, all aluminum engine with the latest thinking in it. It's a die-cast engine, which I won't go into. It's beautifully, beautifully done. It's only a V8 though. Now a person would say, wait a minute, an expensive car like a Cadillac, shouldn't it be a V12? Well, Cadillac's not that expensive. You know, you can do Cadillacs for under 50. I think that's where you put the number, like under $50,000. And in that range, it's a brilliant piece of work. And I think I'm very enthused, very excited about the engine. I just think it's just a brilliant concept and brilliant in execution, design, and everything. However, if you're going to charge me $120,000 for an automobile, like the new Mercedes, that S-Class Mercedes, yeah, you better roll out a beautiful V12, and they have. The new Mercedes is a brilliant V12, no question about it, as is the new BMW, the V12 version that they have. So a lot of this depends on cost and what you're looking for, but I'm telling you, the silky smoothness of a V12 is something to be felt and experienced in order to be appreciated. Now, do we have the gist? Because we've got to move on to this other stuff, and I want to show you the great cars that these guys got down here, too. Anybody questions quickly on this? You get the idea of how engines and why we choose one over the other? Okay.
The new engine configuration I referred to earlier is used in the Bugatti Veyron. Study this graphic and see if you know what the configuration might be called.
held a camera.
Don't go away, folks. We'll be right back.
You get greater volumetric efficiency from smaller cylinders because they're easier to fill and empty, but every cylinder you add needs its own valves, connecting rod, and crankshaft space, so every design is a compromise. Now let's look at some real engines and meet some folks devoted to the straight 8 design.
Well, we have got so much to look at here and talk about, but Kim Donahue, you know me by now. What am I going to do first?
You're going to talk to this beautiful lady right here.
You got that right. I don't walk past a pretty girl ever when I'm worried about engines, that's for sure. First of all, you are?
Laura Schramm,
And where are you from, Laura?
Dalton.
And?
Ronnie.
Ronnie, you know, we always have to end up talking to the guys here because they usually know more about this, but I understand, Laura, you know all about this.
Well, I don't know if I know all about it, but I have helped.
Okay, what have we got here?
We have a Packard straight 8 engine in pieces.
Yes, it is. And as a matter of fact, we had the picture up here. Is that the car that it goes in?
Yes.
Okay, a beautiful piece. Is the body in good shape?
Body's all done, interior's all done. We just have to get the motor done.
Okay, well, to guys like us, this is the easy part. Then if you've got the rest of it and then the appearance right.
Right.
Okay. Ron, what's next?
What's next is I have the machine work done here. Next is to have it powder coated, and then I'll assemble it. But the interesting thing I want to show here is that this is not a high RPM motor, because I want to show you the connecting rod. This is a connecting rod off of this motor, and this is a connecting rod out of a V6. And most V8s are like this, so you can see that this is a more of a torque motor than a RPM, because these things throw rods real easy.
Yes, there's no question about it. As a matter of fact, one of these days we are going to get into detailing something like that. And what we are talking about here, by the way, girls, is we're talking about rod length. And rod length to bore ratios and all that is an interesting subject in and of itself. And I must tell you that in the old days, a lot of the reasons that cars ended up with the bore and stroke configuration they had did not have to do with engineering, but it had to do with taxes and the way the government chose to tax engines. For a period of time, they taxed engines by bore size, and it left, if you wanted more power, just make them longer and longer strokes, and it did tend to distort the design process. Maybe you're not even aware of that.
I was not aware of that, no.
Right. It's the same thing happened. They did this with weights of vehicles, and it tends to distort the whole process because there's other pressures. Just like as I was pointing out before, when we talk about whether we do V12 or V8 or V, there are other pressures besides what an engineer would most like to do, like cost and mechanical complexity and the price of service and all the things. Very often we can't do this in the purest section, in the purest form. One of the things that I did want to point out here is, girls, remember before I was talking about counterweights on a crankshaft?
Right.
Okay, Chuck, is it doable at all? Can you see these counterweights here that happen to be on the crankshaft here? Is that, you have to nod your head if that's visible. Okay, it is in fact visible. And all of this stuff is done in an effort to try to balance the weight of the rod and the piston. As the rod and the piston goes to the top, you want this counterweight swinging to the bottom. As the rod and piston come down to the bottom, you want this counterweight will be swinging around to the top. And as this counterweight is swinging off to one side, where it would normally create an imbalance, you want to make sure that there's a corresponding counterweight down here swinging the other way to balance. Wow. Ron, help me if I got it right?
You got it right. Also on these Packards is that the crankshaft is made and then they add the counterweights on. These things are a real pain when you go to machine the crankshafts. That is one of the next projects. And it has to, all these bolts, there's 24 of them, they have to be drilled out, and there's no heads on them because they eliminated the head, they put screws in and machined the heads right off. So all these counterweights have to come off, and these are add-ons. So they're not like modern motors that are all cast together.
Very often when you're dealing with antique vehicles, when you're putting antique vehicles, you have to learn old sciences and old trades again that we have discarded long ago, correct?
Mm-hmm. That's correct. And a lot of these motors that are today that we have are just modified or fine-tuned of what we have right in front of us. So the old ones and the new ones, it's the same thing. You still need the three basics to run. You got to have fuel, spark, and compression.
Fuel,
No matter
spark,
what
and
year it
compression.
is.
If you got those three, it'll do it, right?
Right. Another unique thing about the older cars is they come in sections. I got a crankcase, I got a block, and I got a head. And you can take the block off of the crankcase in the car and repair just the block and not do anything with the crankcase, whereas modern motors, as we have in front, is all one.
Right, except motorcycles do it very much this way.
Yeah, I heard that. I've never got into motorcycles at all.
Okay, yeah, motorcycles are very much done this way. Now, please, folks, don't run away because I want to make sure we touch on these things here. And as always, we're running out of time on Motorsports Unlimited. And Paul and Jim, if we can get you guys over here to give us a hand for a second. Girls, step forward here, please. Yeah. Guys, if you would, come on over here, please. Yeah, please step right into your camera shot. First of all, girls, Kim Donahue, what have we got here? Tell us. And we got to do this quickly now.
It's a V8.
That's correct. And what kind?
It's a Chevy V8.
Probably the most famous of all. This is a small block Chevy V8, one of the most famous engines made tons of them, great engine. And what have we got here? Kim or Chris, you're leaning over. What have we got?
Well, it's an 8. I don't know if it's
Yeah, come on over here. Come on right over here. Lean over on this side. What have we got?
so I don't know what it is.
No, look on this side. While she's looking at that one and figuring that one out.
It's a Porsche.
Wow, there we are. We're talking about the high price spread here now.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And what we're talking, and again, this is without the head on this side. And this is where the head stops here. And Jim, the reason I need you guys over here, could you come over here and pull this head off, please? I just wanted them to see that when we're talking about the head and the cam takes up a considerable amount of room. Okay, this is how much space this takes up. So when we're talking about all those configurations I showed you, remember, we've got to pile a whole bunch more stuff on there in order to make them work.
Yeah.
And by the way, I should please reintroduce yourself to our audience.
Jim Bushman.
Right, and Jim is the guy that's responsible for, you've been gathering these motors for some time for us?
Yes.
Okay, well, we certainly do appreciate it. Now, don't run away because I'm going to need help because I don't want to get dirty, Jim. Okay, what have we got here, Kim Carlson?
A V6?
Okay, and what kind?
I don't know.
Okay, just lean over and take a look here.
Sterling.
Okay, and what that essentially means is that is Paul Bushman's way of designating this because he doesn't want to say Honda, I'm sure. Am I right, Paul?
Yes, that's actually an Acura motor, but ours came out of a Sterling.
Right, but it's still a Honda.
Correct.
You just don't like to say it.
Say what, Bill?
This is our #1 Dale Earnhardt fan in the world, I want to tell you right now. And you like the American stuff.
Yes, I do.
Okay. And what have we got here? Why don't you explain it, Paul?
That's a Cadillac HD 4100 aluminum V8.
Now, is this one of those that sits
The
in the car
Bugatti
transversely?
Veyron
Car
graphic you looked
that
at
came out of
earlier
the
is
rear-wheel
called a
drive.
W16.
okay, rear-wheel drive,
It's
but
the
this is an aluminum
sexiest version of
V8
this
Cadillac engine, fairly new
configuration,
design.
but there
By the
is
way,
also a
I'm sure
W6,
you're aware of the new North Star
W8,
Cadillac
and
engine.
W12.
How long
We're
will it
going
be
to
before you
show
guys
you
think
what
get
they're
something
all
done here?
about as soon
would
as
say
we
5,
have
6,
one to
7
show
years.
you.
Takes that long, really? So guys that want to do T-Roadsters and stuff like that shouldn't be knocking on the door yet.
No, because of the value of the car, it takes quite a bit to total one out, and that's how we would get it, would be an insurance total. So, I mean, it would have to be completely destroyed. you know.
Okay, okay. So now there we've got an aluminum V8. Now this is one of those things, and I know, Paul, you're going to want to tell me all about this, right? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, Bill, that's the motor or the basic design that sat on the pole this year at Indianapolis.
Paul and I have these little discussions from time to time because he, in fact, does know the truth, though he won't admit it on camera. But what this happens to be is that they took through political influence and they pumped the heck out of this engine to make it competitive with the real race engines. Agreed?
Correct.
You'll give me that much.
But that's why they call it a stock block.
Yeah. Oh, and that's really a stock block.
Well, it's pretty close.
Right. Okay. Kim Donahue, step up here. I want you to come up here and help me with this one. This is another one of those things that you don't even remember existed. What have we got here?
This is 6 opposed.
Okay, this is the opposed 6 configuration, and what was this used in?
It says there a Chevy Corvair.
Now, you don't know what that is, do you?
I did not know what it was.
Yeah, I'm just amazed at that. That was such a big part of this, of the, the story of the period of the time. It's what made Ralph Nader famous. Nobody remembers anymore.
Nope.
It's just amazing to me. Okay, Kim Carlson, if you would step forward to that engine over there, and Kim Donahue, come out over here. What have we got here?
An inline 6.
What is it from?
Jaguar.
That's correct. And when we talk about before about a 6 being more powerful, or a less powerful engine than an 8 and all that, it's not always true. I can tell you that these Jaguar engines, whether this is a 4.2 liter, if this was in an E-type Jaguar, these cars were capable of more than 150 miles an hour. Wow. These engines made plenty of power. Just because an engine's a 6 doesn't mean it's not a powerful engine. We are misunderstanding the process when we say that. But if you took this same size engine, the same total displacement, 4.2 liters, and made it a 4.2 liter V12, you would have greater volumetric efficiency, more power, but also more weight, more bulk, more mechanical complexity. Or if we made this into a 4-cylinder, you would have a shorter, lighter engine,
Right.
but you wouldn't have as much power. Same size, because we have now broken the cylinders up into less numbers of cylinder, and we lose volumetric efficiency. Do you follow that at all?
Yeah, I'm following that.
Okay. What have we got down there?
It's another V6.
No, that's not a
No,
V.
a V. Duh. In line.
Right, that's an inline six, and that one happens to be the Chevy, and that was for years and years and years. That was the staple of American. If you bought the sedan with the economy engine, that's what you got. Now, next one down there is actually a pretty famous engine. If we could, Kim, go ahead and slide down there. And we're running out of time. I don't want to run out of time because I want to look at these great cars these guys have got too. What have we got here?
This inline 4.
Right, this is an inline 4, and what's most important about this one happens to be the quad 4, and the quad 4 means General Motors has talked a lot about this lately. It's really was their first step into state-of-the-art engine design, in that it had 4 valves per cylinder. And I don't know, Chuck, if you can see that or not, but you see it has 4 valves per cylinder. And Jim, if you can turn that one to the camera so the audience can see what 2 valves look like. This is what a normal, more traditional engine looks like. 2 valves per cylinder, meaning 1 intake valve, 1 exhaust valve for each cylinder. This one has 2 intake valves, and what does this give you? What does that do for you? What's the word on top of that sheet?
Volumetric efficiency?
Right, we can improve the volumetric efficiency of the engine by improving the breathing, allowing us to turn more RPM, allowing us to make more power out of the same given volume. Christine, or I'm sorry, Kim Carlson, what have we got?
4 inline.
And from what?
Ford.
Okay, this was, Jim, help me, what have we got?
It's a 1.9 Escort motor.
Okay, made a jillion of them.
Tons.
Okay, if I could ask you to do one more thing, can you grab that cylinder head over there? I want to show that thing off for a second too. Again, when I talk about this volumetric efficiency, we have to understand that the easiest thing in the world to do to make power is just make the engine bigger. That's the easy, lazy way to do it, but it doesn't make the engine more efficient. You can make it bigger and make it more powerful, doesn't mean it's more efficient.
Right.
Here's one of the ways you can make it efficient. Bring that on in here. And what have we got here, Kim?
It's an inline 4, but 5 valves per cylinder.
Right. This is from that Yamaha FCR engine, and this is the most valves you can get in any production engine anywhere in the world, 5 valves per cylinder. And the reason for going through all this, and believe me, this is a ton of engineering work, the reason for going through all this is to improve the volumetric efficiency. That's what we're trying to accomplish here. Yes, you could have made this engine just as powerful. This is a 1,000cc engine. You could have made it just as powerful by making it a 1,200cc engine. And a lot easier to do. But if you're limited, for whatever your reason, if you're committed to efficiency, a fine design, and you want to make improved power, then you have to get involved with all of the tricks to improving the volumetric efficiency. That's what all this is part of. Now, Christine, we've got to run, or we're not going to see those cars out there. Jim, if I could ask you to step back just for a second, because when we've got a girl here handy. Laura, can we get you to come on over here, please? I told you I was going to do this to you. She was scared to death. She's going to be furious with me. Now, you say you watch the show, right?
Yes, I do.
So I don't have to coach you.
No.
Okay, tell the camera.
Don't go away, folks. We'll be right back.
I don't think I completely understand volumetric efficiency, but I do know more than when we started. Now, Bill wanted to take advantage of the fact that the Bushman brothers just happened to have with them their very special personal cars that they assembled from used parts.
When this show was first released, even though there was other material in it, it quickly became known as the Cup Show. We hope you enjoyed it as so many did nearly 20 years ago. We also hope the ABC folks know we're thinking of them. I'm May Chin. Thanks for watching.
Blasted in the back would be a good term. It was hit real hard in the back, and it came in here, it was totaled out, and as soon as I started investigating the car, my brother made me go out and look at it and says, you got to see this car. So I went out and I looked at it, and we talked about it, Jim and I, and we decided to save it and fix it. So I called down south and got a clip for it and sent it up the street here, and we fixed it.
Okay, what is it?
It's a 79 Hurst-Olds Cutlass.
A very rare car.
Yeah, they made 2,499, of which 1,334 were black and gold.
Okay, and it's pretty much been put together with, he hates this when I do it, junkyard parts, except what you mean is used parts, right?
Quality used.
Yes, because
parts.
this is an auto recycling center.
Yeah, we'll start all over with that. Yes, that's what we do here.
Auto recycling.
Correct.
Okay, well, anyhow, we only have a moment on the show, and I wanted you to see this thing. This is a beautiful piece, and there's a point to be made here. Guys out there, you don't have to have a great car. You don't have to have $1 jillion and a big checkbook from GMAC. You can put one together.
Well, that's true. And also what we're trying to get out to the general public, as we get more involved with the newer cars, people get that, I don't want used parts on my car. And this is just one way to show people that you can have, a quality repair and a nice looking car using used parts.
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes seasoned parts, in some instances, they're better.
Right.
Yeah, okay, now I want to take a look at your brother's car real quick. We're out of time, and see what he's doing. He's waving to me. I got to go here. First of all, Jim, you told me the only thing that I'm really particularly interested about this car right off the bat when you pulled in. This is a 12-second car?
That's correct.
Wow, very nicely done. But go ahead and tell our audience, for people that aren't that into racing, what is it?
It's a 71 Buick Skylark, and I put a big block Chevy motor in it.
How big? See, he doesn't want to say. See him hesitate? How big?
I won't say.
It's real big, folks. And this, again, you did this with used parts.
That's correct. This car came into ABC about 5 years ago. Bought it for a couple $100, and this is what I got out of it.
Boy, what an exceptional piece of work. And you don't have to go to the store and spend $1 jillion to have a great car. As a matter of fact, I think this attracts more attention than a lot of new cars.
That's what I think. So I did it this way.
Okay, guys, we got to run. We're out of time on the show. Please don't run away. Christine, tell the camera.
Don't go away, folks. We'll be right back.
If I could put together a car out of used parts like those, I'd never have to go to a new car dealer again. Well, we've only got enough time left to thank our award-winning production team, including Chuck Itzenthaler, Tom McGrady, John Platania, John Papke, and Mike Sabatino. And to tell you that music for this edition of Motorsports Unlimited was created by Fireside Recording Studio in Westchester, Illinois, and independent artists Roger Pauling and Jerry Herbert. Oh yes, special thanks to JBTV's Jerry Bryant. And of course, to thank the stars of today's show, Kim Carlson, Kim Donahue, Chris Schutz, and our host, Bill Wildt. Me, I'm Paul Schultz, reminding you the folks you see on the racetrack every weekend spend every weekday trying to improve volumetric efficiency. Think about it the next time you're cheering your favorite. See you next week.
This program made possible in part by support from Jimmy's Red Hots, located on Green Avenue and Pulaski Road in Chicago.
This program made possible in part by support from J.C. Whitney & Company, located just off I-80 at the Utica exit in LaSalle, Illinois.
Motorsports Unlimited is produced by Bill Wildt, president of the Motorsport Advancement Crusade.
This program made possible in part by support from Bridgestone Firestone and your local Bridgestone Firestone tire retailers.
This program made possible in part by support from ABC Auto Parts, located on Ashland Avenue and 138th Street in Blue Island, Illinois.
This program made possible in part by support from Copy That, located in Carroll Stream, Illinois.
Motorsports Unlimited was created to raise public consciousness, understanding, and appreciation of the motorsport community and their activities. You can contact us by email at msutv.com, or you can write to Motorsport, P.O. Box 66242, Chicago, Illinois, 60666. We enjoy hearing from our audience. Please let us know what you think.
So that's it, another edition of Motorsports Unlimited and the lovely ladies of motorsports. And be with us next week because we'll have something real exciting. Bill Wildt's going to have the lovely ladies, and just about anything can happen right here on Motorsports Unlimited. Every week at this time, we bring you the best in motorsports. So be seeing ya. Bye-bye, and keep on rocking.